Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that everything you believed about thinking, about intelligence, memory, and awareness, was incomplete. You've been told for years that thought lives in the brain, that the mind is simply a machine of neurons firing in the dark cavern of the skull. But then you notice something strange. Your thoughts change when you sit differently. They shift when you walk, when you gesture, when you breathe. The body, it seems, is not just a vessel carrying the brain. It is not merely a biological shell. It is part of the mind itself. Here is the paradox. You have been living under the illusion that the mind is trapped in the head. Yet the truth is far stranger. The mind extends into the body and perhaps even beyond it. Every gesture you make, every step you take, every subtle tilt of your spine alters the way you think and feel. Intelligence is not only in the brain. It is in your hands, your heart, your posture, your very flesh. But if that is true, if the body is inseparable from the mind, then everything you've been taught about self-control, decision-making, and even free will must be re-examined. How much of your rational thought is truly rational, and how much is choreographed by the silent language of the body? Consider this unsettling scene. A man slouches forward in his chair, his shoulders collapsing, his chest closed in. He thinks he is merely resting this way. Yet within minutes he finds himself doubting his own competence, replaying old failures, sinking deeper into self-criticism. Meanwhile, in another room, a woman stands tall, her breath expanding her chest, her shoulders open to the world. She feels possibility. She feels strength. Did they consciously choose these thoughts, or were their thoughts chosen by the way their bodies arranged themselves? How often have you noticed that your creativity sparks more vividly while walking rather than sitting? Why do people gesture with their hands when they struggle to explain an abstract idea? Why do athletes speak of muscle memory when science insists memory is in the brain? Could it be that the body carries its own intelligence, one that modern society has forgotten to honor? The great question, then, is not whether the mind controls the body, but whether the body itself is thinking. Whether thought is a collaboration between muscle, nerve, breath, and bone. And if this is true, then are you truly in control of your life if you ignore the intelligence beneath your skin? This realization unsettles everything. Schools, workplaces, and societies are built on the idea that thinking happens from the neck up. We spend hours chained to desks, heads tilted forward into screens, bodies stiffened into shapes that suffocate imagination. What if this is not just unhealthy but intellectually crippling? What if our culture has systematically silenced the wisdom of the body, reducing us to fragments of what we could be? And here is the more haunting paradox. When you are disconnected from your body, you are not just less healthy, you are less alive, less conscious, less yourself. Perhaps the reason modern people feel alienated, anxious, and perpetually restless is because they have exiled their intelligence from the body that sustains it. So let me ask you, what if the cure for your mental exhaustion is not another app, another productivity hack, or another dose of self-help advice, but something far more ancient? What if the missing key is hidden in the way you breathe, the way you move, the way you inhabit your own skin? You may wonder, could something as simple as posture or gesture really transform thought? Could the rhythm of your walking shape the rhythm of your imagination? Could the act of breathing deeper not only calm you, but also unlock clarity and insight? These questions force us into uncomfortable territory, because if they are true, then we must admit we've been deceived, not by some grand conspiracy, but by a worldview too narrow to hold the full depth of human experience. We must confront the possibility that the mind has never been what we thought it was, and if the mind is not confined to the brain, then who are you, really? Where do you begin and where do you end? Perhaps the truth is both unsettling and liberating. You are not a brain carried by a body. You're a body-mind, a living unity of flesh and thought. To deny this is to cut yourself in half. To embrace it is to rediscover a forgotten power that has been shaping you all along. The question now is, why have we ignored this truth for so long? What forces, psychological and philosophical, have kept us trapped in the illusion of a brain-bound mind? That is where we must go next. Why has this truth, the reality that your body is part of your mind, been buried for so long? Why has modern society for centuries treated the body as a secondary servant of the brain rather than its equal partner? The answer lies in history and philosophy and in psychology. It lies in a hidden problem that shapes the very way we see ourselves, the deep-rooted illusion of dualism, the inherited lie of dualism centuries ago, René Descartes gave the world a sharp declaration, "I think, therefore I am." With these words, the Western world split the human being into two, mind and body, thought and flesh. The mind was elevated as noble, rational, divine. The body was seen as mechanical, crude, even sinful. This Cartesian dualism became the architecture of modern thought. Medicine studied the body as if it were a machine. Philosophy exalted reason while distrusting the senses. Education rewarded abstract thinking while treating physicality as irrelevant, even distracting. And so we inherited a worldview in which intelligence is confined to the skull, while the body is reduced to a shell. But ask yourself, does this picture feel true? When you feel fear, is it only in your thoughts or also in your racing heartbeat, your sweaty palms, your clenched stomach? When you fall in love, is it purely intellectual, or does your whole body pulse with it? The truth is, Descartes gave us clarity, but at a terrible cost. By dividing us into two, he cut us away from the wholeness we actually are. Psychology's complicity, psychology too, for much of its history, reinforced this division. Early cognitive psychology treated the mind as if it was software running on the hardware of the brain. Cognition was described as information processing. Humans were modeled after computers, inputs, outputs, computations, but computers do not pace when they're anxious. They do not breathe differently when they're sad. They do not clench their fists when angry. Humans do. Yet for decades, these bodily realities were dismissed as irrelevant to true cognition. Only in recent years have psychologists begun rediscovering the body as a co-author of thought. The term embodied cognition itself arose to challenge the sterile brain-bound view. Research now shows that gestures help us think, posture shapes confidence, and walking influences creativity. But this is not a new discovery. It is an old truth, one that ancient philosophies always knew. Ancient wisdom, modern amnesia, look back to the Stoics, to Taoism, to Buddhism. They did not see the body as a separate machine, but as a participant in wisdom. Marcus Aurelius wrote about aligning body and mind in virtue. Taoist masters taught that the way you breathe shapes the way you live. Buddhist meditation is built not only on thought, but on posture, breath, and sensation. For millennia, cultures knew that mind and body were inseparable. Yet modernity, intoxicated by rationalism and scientific abstraction, forgot. We amputated ourselves in the name of progress. This is the hidden problem. We live in a culture that idolizes the intellect while quietly starving the body. And because the body silently shapes thought, this starvation impoverishes our minds without us realizing it. The psychological cost of disembodiment. What happens when a society forgets its body? Carl Jung might argue that the body becomes part of the shadow, the rejected, disowned side of the self. In our pursuit of pure rationality, we repress the wisdom of sensation, gesture, and movement. But what is repressed does not vanish. It returns in distorted ways. We see this in rising anxiety, as people live from the neck up, detached from the grounding of breath and movement. We see it in depression, where the body collapses into stillness, posture mirroring despair. We see it in addiction, where numbing the body becomes the only way to silence the pain of disconnection. Arthur Schopenhauer suggested that the body is the will made visible. To ignore it is to ignore the very source of desire, energy, life force. Can it be any surprise, then, that a disembodied culture feels aimless, restless, unmoored? The philosophical depth of the problem at its root, the problem is existential. To live as though the mind is separate from the body is to live divided against oneself. It is to carry an inner fracture, a constant alienation. Jean-Paul Sartre wrote of the nausea of existence, the unsettling realization that being is raw, embodied beyond our control. By denying the body, we try to escape this nausea, but the escape is an illusion. The body remains, whispering truths we refuse to hear. Nietzsche went further, declaring that there is more wisdom in your body than in your deepest philosophy. Yet modern life still resists this truth. We cling to the illusion of a rational, detached mind because it feels safer than admitting how deeply flesh and thought intertwine. The modern world's reinforcement technology only deepens the fracture. Hours spent hunched over screens warp our posture, and with it our confidence and attention. Education systems reward sitting still over moving freely, silencing the natural intelligence of gesture and play. Workplaces demand constant productivity, while the body's cycles of fatigue, hunger, rest are ignored or medicated away. We live in disembodied rhythms, cut off from nature, from movement, from the raw intelligence of the senses, and we wonder why our thinking feels shallow, why our creativity feels blocked, why our lives feel less real. The quiet realization. The hidden problem, then, is not simply ignorance, it is exile. We have exiled the body from our concept of mind, and in doing so, we have exiled ourselves from our own wholeness. And yet, beneath this exile, the truth remains. Your body still shapes your every thought, whether you acknowledge it or not. Your breath still shifts your mood. Your posture still scripts your confidence. Your gestures still carve meaning into the air. The only question is, will you keep living in denial of this, or will you face the hidden roots of your own cognition? Because if you don't, the consequences are already unfolding. Quietly, invisibly, they shape your life in ways you may not yet recognize. The body shapes the mind, whether we admit it or not. And when we refuse to acknowledge this truth, when we continue living as though thought begins and ends in the brain, the consequences ripple silently across our lives. They are rarely dramatic at first. They creep in slowly, shaping how we feel, how we relate, how we create, until one day we discover that our entire existence has been subtly bent by the unseen hand of disembodiment. The erosion of confidence. Consider posture. Studies show that standing tall, shoulders back, chest open, doesn't just signal confidence, it generates it. Hormonal shifts occur. Testosterone rises, cortisol falls. You feel more powerful, not because you convinced yourself intellectually, but because your body whispered it into your bloodstream. Now imagine years of slouching, of curling into yourself over screens and desks. That posture becomes not just a position, but an identity. Without realizing it, you walk into rooms already defeated, thinking small because your body has shrunk your mind. How many opportunities have been lost? Not because you lacked ability, but because your posture betrayed your potential. The shallowing of creativity. Think about when ideas flow most easily. Rarely does inspiration strike when you are chained to a chair, staring at a blank screen. More often it comes when you are moving, walking, showering, pacing, gesturing, as if sculpting ideas out of the air. When you deny your body its role in thinking, creativity suffocates. You force yourself to think harder, yet the harder you sit still, the more rigid your ideas become. The irony is cruel. In the very attempt to maximize mental output, you cut off the physical rhythms that would have freed your imagination. The quiet amplification of anxiety. Anxiety is not just a thought, it is a sensation. A racing heart, shallow breath, tight muscles. To treat it only as a cognitive error is to miss its embodiment. And when you ignore the body, you fuel the cycle. Slouched posture compresses your lungs, leading to shallow breaths. Shallow breaths signal threat to the nervous system, which heightens anxiety. Heightened anxiety fuels more shallow breathing. Without realizing it, your body locks you in a loop, each feedback reinforcing the next. No amount of positive thinking can undo a body trapped in the physiology of fear. Relationships, distorted by disembodiment communication, is not just words. It is tone, gesture, posture, eye contact. Entire layers of meaning flow through the body, often below conscious awareness. When you are cut off from your body, you become cut off from others. You miss subtle cues, you fail to attune, you misread intention. The result is a thinning of intimacy. Relationships feel hollow, conversations surface level, not because the other person is absent, but because you are absent from your own embodiment. Carl Jung might call this the shadow of disembodiment, the very qualities we neglect in ourselves. Vulnerability, sensitivity, presence, we project as missing in others, but in truth they were missing in us all along. Societal echoes of disembodiment zoom out, and the unseen consequences multiply. A society that worships the brain while neglecting the body produces institutions that mirror this split. Schools demand children sit motionless for hours, punishing the natural intelligence of movement. Workplaces glorify long sedentary hours as a badge of productivity, even as they erode health and creativity. Healthcare treats mental illness and physical illness as separate silos, blind to the ways they entangle, and beneath it all, people move through life half present, disconnected from their own depth. The result is a culture that feels shallow, restless, discontent, hungry for something unnamed. Cognitive biases as bodily traps, even the tricks of the mind, the biases we believe are purely cognitive, are shaped by embodiment. Confirmation bias, for instance, grows stronger when we are physiologically aroused. Fear-based thinking narrows perception because the body has already entered survival mode. Your worldview is not just a set of ideas, it is the echo of how your nervous system calibrates threat and safety. Beliefs are written not only in neurons but in muscles, breath, and gut. Depression's physical script: consider depression. Beyond sadness, beyond negative thought, it scripts itself in the body. Hunched posture, lowered gaze, slowed movement. These physical scripts reinforce the mental state, and the mental state reinforces the body. To treat depression only as distorted thought is to overlook its choreography. Healing often begins not in abstract reasoning, but in the slow reawakening of movement, posture, breath. The dance of recovery is as embodied as the descent was, the loss of wholeness. At its deepest level, the unseen consequence of ignoring embodied cognition is the loss of wholeness. To deny the body is to deny half of yourself. You live split, alienated, fractured. You treat your body as a vehicle rather than a companion, as a distraction rather than a co-creator. But this fracture does not go unnoticed by the psyche. It festers as dissatisfaction, as the quiet sense that life feels less vivid than it should. It appears as the nagging feeling that no matter how much you think, plan, or analyze, something essential is missing. The cultural lie we have been sold, a cultural lie, that if we think hard enough we can solve everything. That intellect alone is the key to success, creativity, happiness, but the body resists this lie. It reminds us in aches and fatigue, in anxiety and depression, that it is part of the equation. Ignore it long enough, and it will break you, not out of malice, but out of necessity. For the body will not allow itself to be silenced forever. The tipping point, the unseen consequences then, are not minor. They infiltrate your confidence, creativity, mental health, relationships, even society itself. And all of this happens while you continue believing you are just thinking. But what happens if you stop ignoring the body's role? What if instead of exile you chose integration? What if you dared to rebel against the cultural illusion and reclaim the wisdom of your own flesh? That is where the journey turns next, toward rebellion, toward the rediscovery of embodied freedom. There comes a moment when the weight of disembodiment becomes unbearable. You realize your posture has been scripting your identity, your breath fueling your anxiety, your stillness suffocating your creativity. You recognize the fracture between mind and body for what it is, not truth, but a cultural illusion. And in that moment, rebellion begins. Not rebellion in the sense of rage or destruction, but rebellion as a return. A radical act of reclaiming what was always yours, the intelligence of your own body, the radical perspective. Shift breaking free starts with a shift in perspective. Thought is not confined to the brain. It is distributed through muscles, senses, rhythms. The body is not a cage for the mind, but a collaborator in every act of cognition. This shift feels subtle at first, almost too simple to matter. But it is revolutionary. It dissolves centuries of dualism, cuts through layers of cultural programming, and reunites you with a forgotten truth. Nietzsche once said, "There is more wisdom in your body than in your deepest philosophy." To break free, you must dare to trust that wisdom again. Breath, the gateway to presence. The rebellion begins with breath. You breathe thousands of times a day, mostly unconsciously. Yet each breath is a signal to the nervous system, a story whispered into the brain. Shallow, hurried breaths tell the body to brace for threat. Slow, deep breaths whisper safety, calm possibility. By reclaiming conscious breathing, you seize back control from anxiety's grip. Breath becomes not just survival, but strategy. It grounds you, centers you, clears the fog. This is not mystical, it is physiological. The vagus nerve, linking breath to brain, is a biological reminder that mind and body are one. Movement as thought. Next comes movement. To walk is to think with your legs. To gesture is to think with your hands. Movement is not the enemy of concentration, it is its catalyst. Albert Einstein claimed that he thought best while walking. Nietzsche wrote most of his works in motion. Even today, studies confirm that walking boosts creativity. Gesturing enhances problem-solving and physical rhythm sharpens cognition. To break free, you must return to this truth. Stagnation is not intelligence. Movement is posture as identity. Your posture is not just how you stand. It is how you stand in life. Curled inward, you script yourself as small, hesitant, doubtful. Open and expansive, you script yourself as capable, daring, ready. The rebellion, then, is to treat posture not as an afterthought, but as a declaration. Straighten your spine not as performance, but as authenticity. You are not pretending to be confident. You are embodying the confidence already latent within you. Over time, the posture becomes the person. You reclaim agency not only in thought, but in being. Sensation as guide, the body speaks in sensations. Tightness in the chest, tension in the jaw, heaviness in the limbs. These are not distractions, but data. They are messages from the unconscious, signals about what your deeper self is trying to tell you. Carl Jung might call this the voice of the shadow, surfacing through the flesh. By attending to sensation, you make the unconscious conscious. You integrate instead of repress. The rebellion, then, is to stop silencing these signals with constant noise, screens, stimulants, busyness, and to start listening. Integrating ancient practices across cultures, practices arose to honor embodied cognition, yoga, tai chi, martial arts, meditation. These were never just physical exercises. They were philosophies in motion, technologies of integration. To embrace them today is not cultural nostalgia. It is rebellion against a world that tells you to live only in your head. Each practice reawakens the truth that movement and thought, breath and spirit are inseparable. Everyday embodied acts. The rebellion does not require monasteries or retreats. It begins in daily life, walking while letting your mind wander instead of staring at a screen, speaking with your hands instead of clutching them still, pausing to breathe before answering an email, adjusting posture before entering a difficult conversation, listening not only with your ears, but with your skin, your eyes, your gut. These are small acts, but they accumulate into transformation. You stop living from the neck up and begin inhabiting the full architecture of yourself. The psychological liberation. When you reclaim embodied cognition, anxiety loses its chokehold. Creativity flows again. Relationships deepen because you are truly present, attuned not just mentally but physically. You begin to feel whole, not because life is suddenly easy, but because you are no longer fractured. You stand in alignment, thought and flesh in dialogue. This wholeness is rebellion against a culture that profits from your disconnection, against workplaces that value productivity over humanity, against technologies that hijack attention while numbing sensation, against philosophies that cut you into pieces. The courage to defy the norm, to live embodied, is, in some ways, to live against the grain. The others may scoff, clinging to the illusion that the mind is a machine floating above flesh. But rebellion has always required courage. Jean-Paul Sartre spoke of the responsibility of freedom, the weight of choosing authentically in a world that pressures conformity. Reclaiming embodied cognition is such a choice. It is an act of freedom, a refusal to accept the narrow script society hands you. The dawn of a new integration. The rebellion is not destruction, but reintegration. You are not rejecting intellect, you are expanding it. You are restoring the partnership between body and mind that has always existed but was long denied. And once you taste this integration, you cannot go back. The body, once dismissed, becomes your ally, your compass, your co-creator, but there is still a final step. Rebellion leads somewhere deeper, not just to integration but to revelation. Because once you begin to live embodied, you uncover something even more profound, the ultimate truth of who and what you really are. Imagine this. One morning you wake, not with thoughts racing, but with silence. You take a breath, and for the first time you truly feel it. Not as air, not as function, but as life itself. In that instant, something dawns on you. You are not a mind using a body, nor a body carrying a mind. You are a living whole, inseparable, indivisible. This realization is not academic. It is visceral. It shatters the centuries-old illusion of dualism. It redefines what it means to be human. Beyond the cage of the skull, we have been taught to live as if imprisoned inside our skulls. Every experience reduced to neurons firing, thoughts circling, reason churning. But the ultimate truth is this. Consciousness is not trapped inside the head. It radiates through flesh, through sensation, through the very act of being alive. When you walk, your steps are not just transportation, they are cognition, rhythm-shaping thought. When you gesture, your hands do not decorate words, they think with you, carving meaning in space. When you breathe, it is not mere oxygen exchange, it is dialogue between nervous system and mind. You are not a ghost in a machine. You are the machine and the ghost, the dancer and the dance, the thinker and the flesh intertwined. A new definition of intelligence. The paradigm shift is this. Intelligence is not purely cerebral. It is embodied. To recognize this is to expand the very definition of what it means to be intelligent. A child playing, tumbling, exploring is not wasting time. They are building thought through movement. An artist painting with their whole body is not distracted. They are embodying ideas through sensation. A person who feels deeply in their gut, who trusts intuition, is not irrational. They are drawing on a wisdom older than language. This realization dismantles hierarchies that have long devalued the body. It levels the ground between intellect and embodiment, restoring dignity to the whole human. Healing the fracture. The ultimate truth also heals the existential fracture. For centuries, humans have felt split, mind yearning upward, body dragging downward. But once you see that the two are one, the split dissolves. Carl Jung described individuation as the process of becoming whole, integrating shadow with light, unconscious with conscious. Embodied cognition is individuation lived in flesh. You are not two halves stitched together. You are already whole once you stop denying it. The body as portal to transcendence. There is another layer to this realization. Once you embrace embodiment, you see the body not only as partner in thought, but as portal to the transcendent. Through posture, you enter courage. Through movement, you unlock creativity. Through breath, you taste serenity. These are not metaphors. They are direct experiences. Mystics across cultures knew this. Sufi whirling, Buddhist breathing, Taoist flow, Christian kneeling, all were acts of cognition, worship, transcendence through the body. The body was never the obstacle to spirit. It was always the bridge, the freedom to live fully. With this realization comes freedom. You no longer live fractured, chasing endless self-improvement of the mind while neglecting the vessel that sustains it. You begin to live fully, present in every cell. Anxiety becomes not an enemy but a signal from your body to be heard. Creativity is no longer forced, but invited through rhythm and gesture. Relationships deepen as you attune to others not just with words, but with the full presence of your body. Life regains texture, depth, vividness. You stop existing as a thinker inside a cage and start living as a whole being in a living world. The paradigm shift in society. If individuals awaken to this truth, society cannot remain the same. Education would no longer chain children to desks, but honor movement as thought. Workplaces would no longer glorify exhaustion, but balance rhythms of mind and body. Healthcare would no longer split mental and physical, but treat them as one system. A culture of embodied cognition would be a culture of wholeness, a world where intellect and body, reason and sensation, thought and movement, dance together again, the poetic ending and so the final. Most powerful realization is simple yet profound. You are not divided. You never were. The fracture was an illusion, a story passed down through centuries reinforced by culture, technology, philosophy. But beneath it you have always been whole. You are the breath and the thought, the step and the idea, the posture and the identity, the body and the mind. To face this truth is to awaken from the dream of disconnection. It is to reclaim the forgotten power that was always within you. And in this awakening, something shifts forever. The world looks sharper, richer, more alive. Because you are sharper, richer, more alive, you are no longer trapped inside your head. You are embodied, present, whole, and perhaps at last truly free.